Welcome back. I'm Betsy Bosley, the dietitian from the Pathway to Health and Wellness program. Today we're going to be talking about lunches. Lunches can be a very tricky time to eat nutritiously because we have only two choices. We can pack a lunch, which can be sometimes very tricky, or we can eat food at a restaurant. I definitely recommend trying to limit restaurant visits to twice a week or less, and that's because we don't really know what is in our restaurant food. Many times the chefs get a little liberal with the salt shaker and also just adding a lot of extra fat. And so this can really give us way too much salt and contribute to weight gain because fat provides a lot of calories. Packing a lunch can also be very tricky. Most of us kind of resort to prepackaged options. Down below, I have some of these options. The first item I have are these lovely Lunchables. And I remember these from my childhood because my mom wouldn't buy them, and I was so jealous of the other kids. And luckily, my mom knows a little something about nutrition because these things are not very healthy. They range around 580 milligrams of sodium, and they have a lot of fat. They have 16 grams total fat in them. So that's a lot for just a tiny little lunch. No vegetables whatsoever. The next item I have is this delicious cup o' noodles, and these are pretty popular among adults for lunch. And this one is a whopping 1,190 milligrams of sodium for one container of this. So our recommended sodium per day is 1,500 milligrams. So that is also almost approaching this for this little cup. And it's only 290 calories. So if you were trying to fill yourself up with this, you could be running 6,000, 7,000 milligrams of salt per day. So it's pretty unhealthy. This is more of an adult choice. You know, a lot of people will get these frozen dinners thinking that they're pretty healthy. And this one we have right here is chicken fettuccine Alfredo. This one runs around 780 milligrams of sodium for the whole thing. And so that's about half of what we recommend per day for salt. And it just doesn't look very exciting in my opinion. I think we can do better. The last choice is, looks pretty healthy. It's kind of a deli salad that you can get at most grocery stores. And it's got some healthy choices in it. It's got some black beans and some corn, which will actually be in the salad that we're making later today. And it's got some vegetables. But it definitely, they add some cheese to it. And with this entire big cup of ranch dressing, if we flip it over, looks like it's about over 1,000 milligrams of sodium. That's probably because they do have the chicken in it, which probably has salt water injected into it. And then it's got these little tortilla chips, these little jalapeno things. They might have some salt in them as well. So, and it's also got probably a lot of fat. It's got 43 grams of fat for a container. So that actually has more fat than anything else in this lineup, even though it's just a salad, which is perceived as healthy. It's definitely from the cheese, and the ranch dressing will also have a lot of fat in it, as well as salt. So moving on to what we're going to be making today for our meals, we have 3 delicious lunch choices that are very easy to make ahead of time. Today we'll be making 3 recipes. The first one is a peanut butter vegetable soup. This soup is a really great choice for the winter months because it's very nutritious, but it's also great at warming you up. Our second recipe will be a black bean and couscous salad, which has lots of good vegetables and some cumin and lime juice to kind of spice it up. And our last choice today will be a wrap with vegetables and a hummus spread. And that wrap is a great choice to use leftover grilled vegetables. So you can grill them the night before, have them with something else, and then the next day you can use them in the wrap. So let's get started on our first recipe, our peanut butter vegetable soup. All right, to start out the peanut butter vegetable soup, we obviously need vegetable broth. And this vegetable broth is low sodium. It's 140 milligrams of sodium for a 1 cup serving. And so this is just a very convenient way to get soup started. And so we're just going to pour it into our pot. And so we need 8 cups of broth for this recipe. It makes a lot of food. So obviously you can have this recipe if you want to. All right. And if you don't have vegetable broth, you can use water in a pinch, and I think it would still be very tasty. The peanut butter in this soup is really what's going to give the soup its delicious flavor, because this is the best broth I've ever tasted, and I think a lot of it has to do with the peanut butter. So it's a lot of broth. And right back here, while I'm pouring the broth, so we've got 2 cups of cubed potatoes. And I like to keep the potato skins on because they add a lot of fiber and good nutrients. And so we'll just kind of gently put this in here so it doesn't splatter everywhere. Oop. Potatoes kind of get a bad rep. I think it's hard to avoid splattering, but yeah, potatoes get a bad rep. A lot of people think that they're too many carbs or that sort of thing, but they actually have a lot of nutrients. And they're the highest source of potassium pretty much anywhere. And potassium's great for lowering our blood pressure and just helping a lot of things in our body to work well. It actually helps our body naturally get rid of sodium. So the next ingredient that we have is our carrots, and I just used whole carrots and cubed them up. And I didn't peel the carrots. Some people like to do this because it makes it look prettier, but when you're making a soup, it doesn't really matter. And the peel in the carrot is actually where a lot of the nutrients are. So we're just going to stir the soup, and I've already got the heat on, and so it's ready to bring to a boil. And while we're doing that, we're going to start on our next recipe and cook the couscous. All right, so now we're going to cook our couscous, and the first thing that we need is 1.25 cups of broth, and so we're using the low sodium vegetable broth that we used in the vegetable peanut butter soup. So we'll just pour that in. And we're going to bring it to a boil with the couscous in it. And so then we'll add our couscous. And couscous is round pasta. And there are several types of this couscous. This is a pearl couscous, so it's got larger grains. And other types of couscous tend to be smaller grained, like bits of sand. So we're just going to add it to our broth, and we'll stir it in. And we'll bring it to a boil. And once it's brought to a boil, then we can turn the heat off, and we'll cover it with our lid. So our soup has been simmering for about 10 minutes, so we're going to add the next vegetables to it. The first thing that we're going to do is this no salt added diced tomatoes, and we can just pour this whole thing in. And I love using canned products for cooking because it can save us a lot of time. And a lot of canned products, again, get a bad rep, but if they're no sugar added or no salt added, they should be just fine. Our next ingredient is going to be 1 cup of diced zucchini. So we'll put that in. Ooh. The next ingredient is going to be 1 cup of broccoli florets. After this, we can add some celery. So we're doing 1/2 cup of diced celery. That one didn't want to come out. And then the last one is about 1/2 cup of diced onions. We actually have a bit more. There's a lot of vegetables in this soup, which is so good for us. The very last one is the bell peppers. So I use green bell peppers. You can use whatever color you prefer. And then we're just going to add a little bit of garlic at the very end. And this is just minced garlic. Okay, so we'll stir all these wonderful vegetables in. And then we'll let the soup simmer for a bit longer. So the last two ingredients we're going to add to our soup are a half a cup of unsalted peanut butter and then a quarter cup of minced parsley. So now we'll be adding the peanut butter to the soup and just gently putting it in. I was really skeptical the first time I tried this recipe, but I've made it several times this winter already, so I think it's definitely a winner. The peanut butter just gives the broth a really rich flavor that a lot of times you can't really tell that it's peanut butter, but you just know that it tastes really rich and good. And unlike, if you were adding lard to a soup or animal fat or something, other animal fats, this is going to be a really heart-healthy fat. And then we'll add our parsley to kind of give it a pretty color. So depending on your spice preferences, you can definitely add other flavorings to the soup besides just black pepper. You could add some curry powder, you could add chili powder, whatever sounds good to you. And so this is kind of what our soup is going to look like, and just a really delicious thing to have on a winter day. All right, so we're going to check on our couscous, and it looks like it's boiling, so we're going to take it off the heat and just leave this cover on to kind of cook it for a few more minutes. And then we're going to come over here and make our vinaigrette. So our first ingredient to make the vinaigrette will be 3 tablespoons of olive oil. Now, olive oil is a really good heart-healthy fat, and it does great in cold salads like this. Okay, so the next ingredient will be lime juice, and we're going to add, doesn't want to open for me. We're going to add 2 tablespoons of lime juice. I love lime juice. It smells amazing. Okay, so we'll add that lime juice. And then after that, we're going to use some apple cider vinegar. And you can use kind of whatever vinegar you want. You could use red wine, whatever you prefer. So we're going to add 1 teaspoon of this. And then at the end, we're going to add one of my favorite spices, cumin. This one calls, doesn't quite fit, so we'll just kind of estimate. So it calls for a half teaspoon of cumin. And so we'll just add that. And then we're just going to whisk up the vinaigrette. So that just means taking a fork and just whisking it so it kind of mixes everything together and gets all of those delicious flavors blended. And now we're going to mix in our vegetables. So we have an entire bell pepper. I wanted to just use yellow because it adds some nice color, so we'll add this. Look at our spoon, get it all mixed up. Okay, so 1 bell pepper, and then we have 8 diced green onions. And I really like green onions because they give that good oniony flavor, but they're not quite as strong as regular onions. And the last thing we're going to add is a 1/4 cup of cilantro, which any good kind of southwestern dish should have. And so we will mix this all together in the marinade. It smells really good. And we're also going to add about a cup of frozen corn. And frozen vegetables are a really awesome, convenient way to get your vegetables. And it's not quite a cup. I guess I ate a little too much corn earlier, but that's okay. And our last ingredient to really make this a balanced meal are the no salt added black beans in a can. And so I've drained these for the most part, so we're just gonna pour these in. I eat beans almost every day, and I think they are just so good and so good for us. And we're gonna add 2 cans. So lots of beans, lots of good fiber, and some good protein. And so we'll blend all this up. So pretty. And I think our couscous should be pretty much cooked by now. And they actually say to kind of fluff the couscous a bit with a fork. I think this kind of looks like tapioca. It's kind of a fun texture to eat, I think. And so with the couscous and the black beans, it kind of is a perfect balance of protein because beans tend to not have some of the amino acids that grains have, and grains have amino acids that beans don't have. So it's kind of a perfect meal. And so we're gonna just blend this all together. And this is one of these dishes that I think gets better with age, you know. So after this, we're gonna put it in the fridge and let it sit, and it'll be delicious for lunch tomorrow. So our last recipe, we're going to be grilling vegetables and then spreading them on flatbread to make little wraps and having hummus in those wraps as well. So I'm just finishing up grilling these vegetables. And so, let's see, they're cooling down a bit now. So I'm gonna take them out of the pan. And this is something great that you can make the night before, and you can get these all prepped to make wraps for lunch the next day. And I like the, caramelized onions. I really like the flavor of them. So good. Same thing with all caramelized vegetables. They're just delicious this way. All right, and you can kind of coarsely chop these. You can chop them as finely or coarsely as you want. So we've got our onions, we've got our red bell pepper, and then we've got some eggplant slices. So this would be a really great recipe in the summer if you have a garden. And it's always fun to use eggplant in different ways besides like eggplant parm. So you can kind of just coarsely chop these. And they're nice and soft, so they'll go really well in the wraps. And so we're going to put the vegetables in flatbread wraps, and you could also use whole wheat tortillas. It doesn't really matter. I just thought this was kind of a fun option, and these are a very whole grain flatbread. They have flax in them, so they're about 8 grams of fiber per wrap. And so, and they're nice and soft, so you can kind of just, do an even distribution of your vegetables. So you can just add however much of each vegetable you want. I'm going to really fill these up with a lot of veggies. And we want to make sure we get some of those caramelized onions. And then we can grab some of our hummus dip and spread it on the tortilla. And then we're going to grab some feta cheese, and this is lower fat feta cheese. And they just use, kind of the skim version of the milk. And we'll just sprinkle a little bit on. And we could add maybe just a tad, little bit of parsley for some color. And we have a really delicious wrap, so we can just wrap it up as tightly as possible. And you've got a nice little meal for your lunch the next day. I just wanted to show you kind of what it looks like in the middle. There we go. So there you have it, 3 new recipes to try instead of pre-packaged processed foods that will leave you tired. Instead, you have healthy choices full of nutrients that will leave you energized for the rest of the day.